The night my parents chose my brother again, something in me finally broke. I stood there, listening as they defended him, like always, while everything I had built quietly collapsed. I kept waiting for them to see me just once. They didn't. So I stopped fighting and I walked away. No goodbye. No second chances. Just silence. And that's when everything changed. Would you forgive them, or walk away for good? My parents chose my brother again, even after he ruined my life. The words didn't come out loud, but they burned in my chest as I stood there, watching them defend him like it was instinct. My mother's voice was soft, almost pleading. He didn't mean it, Emily. You know how he is. I did know. That was the problem. Across the room, Jason wouldn't even look at me. Hands in his pockets, eyes on the floor, silent, protected, untouchable. And me? I was the one expected to understand. Again. A suitcase sat by the door. Half packed, half decided. I hadn't planned to leave that night. Not really. I told myself I just needed space, a walk, anything to cool down. But then my father spoke, calm and final. Family comes first. You don't turn your back on your brother. I almost laughed. The irony hit so hard it felt physical. When have you ever not turned your back on me? I asked, my voice quieter than I expected. No one answered. That silence said everything. Something inside me shifted, not loudly, not dramatically, just done. Years of trying, explaining, proving, gone in a single breath. I reached for the suitcase handle, and this time, I didn't hesitate. Behind me, my mother called my name. Not loudly, not urgently, just enough to ease her conscience. I didn't turn around, because for the first time, I understood the truth I had been avoiding my whole life. This wasn't about one mistake, one argument, or one bad day. This was a pattern, a choice. And it was never me. The door closed with a quiet click. But what broke me wasn't that moment. It was what they did next. My name is Emily Carter, I'm 28, and for most of my life, people believed I came from a perfect family. From the outside, it looked effortless, suburban house, Sunday dinners, smiling photos on the wall. My father worked long hours, my mother never missed a holiday, and my older brother, Jason, was the kind of son everyone praised. If you asked anyone back then, they would have said we were lucky. I used to repeat that word too. Lucky. But the truth didn't live in those photos. It lived in the small moments no one saw, the pauses in conversations, the way attention shifted, the way my name was always said second, or not at all. Emily, be patient. Emily, don't make this harder than it is. I learned early how to read the room. When Jason messed up, the atmosphere tightened, fragile, protective. When I succeeded, it passed quickly, like something expected, nothing worth stopping for. So I adjusted. I worked harder, spoke less, tried to become the version of myself that wouldn't cause inconvenience. And for a long time, I convinced myself that was normal, that every family had an invisible hierarchy, and I just happened to be lower on it. But sometimes, late at night, when everything went quiet, a question would surface, uninvited, impossible to ignore. Why am I always the one they don't choose? I never said it out loud, because a part of me was afraid. I already knew the answer. I think the first time I truly felt it, the difference, the quiet shift in value, was on my 12th birthday. I had been counting down for weeks. Nothing extravagant, just a small dinner, maybe a cake, a moment where the attention stayed on me long enough to feel real. My mom even asked what flavor I wanted. Chocolate, I said, trying not to sound too excited. She smiled. Of course. That evening, the house was louder than usual. Jason had invited a few of his friends over, something about celebrating a game he'd won. I didn't question it. I told myself it could be both his thing and mine. Family shared, right? When the cake finally came out, the room gathered. Candles flickered. I stepped closer, heart beating faster, ready to hear my name. But then I froze. Written across the cake, in bright blue icing, were the words, "Congratulations, Jason." I blinked, certain I'd misread it. "Mom." She barely looked at me. "We'll celebrate yours properly this weekend, okay? This was just easier tonight." Easier. Jason laughed as his friends cheered, blowing out the candles in one breath. No one noticed I had stepped back. No one saw my hands curl slightly at my sides. "Come on, Emily, don't make a face," my dad added casually. "It's just a cake. Just a cake." I nodded, forcing a small smile, even clapping when everyone else did. Because that's what I had learned to do: adjust, minimize, disappear when necessary. But something about that moment stayed with me. Not because of the cake itself, but because of how easily I was replaced. And as I stood there, watching my birthday turn into someone else's celebration, a quiet thought settled in, one I couldn't shake anymore. Maybe this wasn't a one-time thing. Not long after that, I started noticing a pattern, one that didn't make sense at first, but became impossible to ignore. It usually began the same way: a loud noise, a broken object, a sudden shift in the house. One afternoon, it was the sound of glass shattering in the kitchen. I was upstairs, doing homework, when my mom called out sharply, "Emily." I hurried down, confused. Jason was already there, standing near the counter, hands slightly raised, like he'd just stepped back. On the floor, pieces of a glass bowl were scattered everywhere. "What happened?" I asked. My mom didn't answer me. She looked straight at Jason. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine," he said quickly. Then, after a brief pause, he added, "Emily left it too close to the edge." I blinked. "I didn't even, Emily," my dad cut in, his tone firm, final. "You need to be more careful." The words landed before I could defend myself. I looked at Jason, waiting, just for a second, for him to correct it. He didn't. He just shrugged, like it was easier this way. "I wasn't even here," I said quietly. My mom sighed, already picking up the pieces. "It doesn't matter. Just help clean this up." So I did. Kneeling on the floor, gathering shards that weren't mine, apologizing for something I hadn't done. Because arguing never changed anything. It only made things worse. That was when the frustration started to settle in, not loud, not explosive, but steady. A quiet realization that truth didn't carry much weight in this house. And as I stood there, holding the last piece of broken glass, one thought pressed harder than the rest: if this could happen so easily, then it wouldn't be the last time. After a while, the blame wasn't even the part that hurt the most. It was what came after, the comparisons. Quiet at first, almost casual, like passing comments that didn't seem important, until they started repeating. "Why can't you be more like your brother?" It would come up in the smallest moments. If I hesitated before answering a question. If I disagreed. If I simply didn't react the way they expected. Jason didn't even have to be present. His name was enough to fill the space. One evening at dinner, I remember trying to explain something from school, something I was actually proud of. My dad nodded, distracted, barely listening. Then Jason walked in late, dropped his bag, and suddenly the room shifted. "There he is," my mom smiled, her voice lifting. "How was your game?" I stopped talking. No one noticed. "He scored twice," my dad added, already more engaged. "That's what focus looks like." Then his eyes flicked toward me. "You should learn from that." I stared at my plate, the food untouched. "Learn what, exactly?" "How to be him. How to take up space without earning it." "I'm doing well too," I said, softer than I intended. My mom sighed lightly. "Emily, no one said you weren't. Just try to be a little more like Jason. He doesn't make things so complicated." Complicated. The word stayed with me longer than it should have. I replayed it over and over, trying to understand what part of me needed to shrink to become easier to love. So I tried. I spoke less, questioned less, smiled when expected. And for a moment, it seemed to work. Fewer corrections, fewer sighs. But something else started fading too, something quieter, harder to name. Because every time they compared me to him, a small part of who I was felt unnecessary. And eventually, one question began to surface more often than I could ignore. If being myself was never enough, then who was I supposed to become? At some point, I stopped expecting praise, but I still hoped to be seen. So when I brought home my report card that year, I didn't say anything at first. Straight A's. Every subject. I left it on the kitchen counter, right where my mom would see it while making coffee. Not for attention, just for acknowledgement. Hours passed. That evening, she picked it up, glanced over it, and gave a small nod. Good. That's what you're supposed to do. Then she set it down and moved on, already thinking about something else. I stood there for a second longer than necessary. That's it? She looked back, slightly confused. What do you mean? I worked really hard for that. And you did well, she replied calmly. But Emily, this is normal for you. We expect this. Expect. The word felt heavier than it should have. Like everything I achieved had already been decided in advance, leaving no room for surprise, no space for pride. A few days later, Jason barely passed a math test. I remember the way my dad clapped him on the shoulder. Hey, that's improvement. Good job. My mom smiled, relieved, like something important had been saved. I watched from the doorway, silent. Same house. Same parents. Different rules. It wasn't that they didn't notice me. It was worse than that. They had already decided I didn't need to be celebrated. And slowly, without anyone saying it out loud, a quiet understanding settled in. If I succeeded, it was expected. If he struggled, it was forgiven. And somewhere in between those two truths, I stopped mattering. For a long time, I told myself there was a reason for all of it, something I could fix if I just tried harder. Maybe I wasn't patient enough. Maybe I spoke at the wrong time. Maybe I simply hadn't earned it yet. So I adjusted again. I stayed up later to study, even when no one checked my grades anymore. I helped around the house without being asked, hoping someone would notice before I had to point it out. When Jason made mistakes, I stepped in quietly, smoothing things over, telling myself this was what a good daughter did. And sometimes, in very small ways, it almost felt like it worked. A brief smile. A softer tone. Moments that made me think, maybe this is it. Maybe now they see me. But those moments never lasted. They slipped away as quickly as they came, replaced by the same familiar distance. Still, I held on to the belief. Because letting go of it felt heavier than holding it. If I just keep going, I whispered to myself once, standing alone in my room, they'll love me the same way. I needed that to be true. Because the alternative, the idea that no amount of effort would ever change their choice, was something I wasn't ready to face yet. By the time I got into college, I thought things might finally change. Distance, independence, maybe that would reset something between us. Maybe without Jason in the same house, I would finally be seen for who I was. For a moment, it almost felt possible. I chose a university I could afford, worked out a schedule, picked up a part-time job before classes even started. I told myself this was good, this was growth. You'll be fine, my mom said, giving me a quick hug before I left. You've always been responsible. Responsible. Capable. Independent. Words that sounded like compliments, but felt like permissions to be left alone. Jason, on the other hand, stayed closer to home. Different school. Different plan. I didn't think much of it until one weekend when I came back to visit. His car was new. Not flashy, but new enough to stand out in the driveway. Wait, when did he get that? I asked, setting my bag down. My dad barely looked up. He needed it for school. We helped him out. Helped him out. I nodded slowly. That's nice. Later that night, I sat at the kitchen table, going over my expenses. Tuition, rent, groceries, numbers that never quite balanced. I hesitated, then asked, "Do you think maybe you could help me a little too? Just for this semester?" The room went quiet for a second. My mom exchanged a glance with my dad. "Emily, you're doing so well on your own," she said carefully. "We don't want to interfere with that." Interfere. So, no, it's not about no, my dad added. It's about teaching you to stand on your own. I almost smiled at that. Almost. Because standing on my own was never really my choice. And as I looked around that same kitchen, something became painfully clear. Support wasn't something we earned in this family. It was something they chose to give. And once again, they hadn't chosen me. I tried to accept it. Told myself it was just how things worked, that I needed to focus on my own path and stop expecting anything in return. And for a while, I did. I worked more hours. Skipped meals when I had to. Watched every dollar like it mattered, because it did. Slowly, carefully, I built a small savings account. Nothing impressive, just enough to feel safe. Like maybe, for the first time, I had something that was mine. Then one morning, I opened my banking app. The number didn't look right. I blinked, refreshed the screen, thinking it was a glitch. It wasn't. The balance had dropped drastically. Almost empty. My heart started racing. I scrolled through the transactions, each one hitting harder than the last. Transfer after transfer. All authorized. All real. And then I saw the name. Jason. I didn't even remember dialing, but suddenly my mom was on the phone. "Hey, sweetheart, what happened to my money?" I cut in, my voice shaking despite trying to stay calm. There was a pause. Too long. "Oh, that," she said, like it was something small. "Your brother needed help. It was urgent." "From my account?" "Well, you weren't using it right now," she replied gently. "We were going to tell you." "Going to tell me?" I gripped the phone tighter. "You didn't ask." "It's family, Emily." My dad's voice came through in the background. "We help each other." I let out a short breath, something between a laugh and disbelief. "Then why does it only go one way?" Silence again. Familiar. Comfortable for them. I looked back at the screen, at the empty balance, the number I had built piece by piece now reduced to almost nothing. And for the first time, the anger didn't stay quiet. Because this wasn't about money anymore. It was about the fact that even what was mine had never really been mine at all. I wish I could say that was the moment I stopped helping him. But it wasn't. Because a few weeks later, my phone rang again, late at night this time. My mom's name flashed on the screen. I already knew it wasn't going to be good news. "Emily, we need you," she said the second I picked up. No greeting. No hesitation. My chest tightened. What happened? "It's Jason. He's in trouble." Of course he was. I grabbed my keys without thinking, heart pounding as she rushed through the details. Something about an argument, a damaged car, people involved who weren't going to let it go easily. The kind of situation that didn't just disappear overnight. When I arrived, Jason was sitting on the curb, silent, staring at the ground like a child caught doing something he didn't understand. My dad stood nearby, tense. My mom looked at me the moment I stepped out of the car, relief flooding her face. "Thank God you're here," she said. "Not are you okay?" "Not this isn't your responsibility." Just relief, because I could fix it. I took a slow breath. "What exactly do you need me to do?" My dad answered quickly. "You're better with people. Talk to them. Calm this down." So I did. I spoke carefully, negotiated, apologized for things that weren't mine to apologize for. I stayed until the situation settled, until everyone else could walk away without consequences. And when it was over, Jason finally looked at me. "Thanks," he muttered. Just one word. I nodded, too tired to respond. Because standing there, I realized something I hadn't wanted to admit before. I wasn't part of this family in the way I thought. I was their solution. After that night, something in me started to resist, but not loudly, not in a way they could easily see. It was quieter than that. A hesitation. A question I didn't ask out loud. But they noticed the change anyway. A few days later, we were sitting in the living room, the air still heavy from everything that had happened. Jason was on his phone, scrolling like nothing had ever gone wrong. My mom kept glancing at me, waiting. "Emily," she finally said, her tone softer than usual, "your brother is going through a hard time right now." I didn't respond immediately. "I helped," I said after a moment. More than once. My dad leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "And that's exactly why you need to keep doing it." I looked up. "Need to? It's what family does," he replied. "You're his sister." There it was again. Not a request. Not even a conversation. A role I was expected to play without question. "What about me?" I asked before I could stop myself. When I needed help, where was this? Silence stretched across the room. Jason didn't look up. My mom sighed, like I was making things harder than necessary. "Emily, this isn't about keeping score." But it always was. Just not in my favor. "You're stronger," she continued gently. "He needs more support." Stronger. The word felt like a label I had never agreed to carry. Like being capable meant being endlessly available. "So because I can handle it," I said slowly, "I have to keep fixing everything?" No one answered directly. They didn't have to. The expectation was already set. And as I sat there, listening to the same reasoning dressed up in different words, the anger didn't explode, it tightened. Controlled. Focused. Because for the first time, I wasn't just hurt. I was starting to understand exactly what they were asking of me. And how much it was costing. That night, I didn't argue anymore. I just went back to my room, closed the door quietly, and sat on the edge of the bed, staring at nothing in particular. The house was still alive outside, voices, movement, the faint sound of the TV, but none of it reached me the same way. For the first time, I let the thought finish itself. What if this never changes? It didn't come with anger. Not even sadness at first. Just a slow, heavy clarity settling in. Every moment replayed itself, birthdays, blame, comparisons, expectations, lining up in a pattern I could no longer deny. I had always believed there was a point to all of it. That one day, something would shift. That they would finally look at me and choose me without hesitation. But what if that day was never coming? I leaned back, pressing my hands over my eyes, as if that could block the realization out. It didn't. "Maybe I'm just not enough," I whispered into the silence. The words felt wrong, but also familiar. And then another question followed, sharper this time, impossible to ignore, or maybe. I was never the one they were going to choose in the first place. I let my hands fall, staring up at the ceiling, the weight of that thought pressing down harder with each passing second. Because if that was true, then everything I had been holding on to was already gone. For a while, I tried to move forward as if that realization hadn't changed anything. I kept working, kept studying, kept telling myself that as long as I stayed focused, everything would eventually stabilize. And for a short time, it almost did. Bills were tight, but manageable. My schedule was exhausting, but predictable. I told myself I could handle it. I always had. Until one week, everything shifted. It started with a call from my landlord. Calm voice, but firm. "Emily, I need the rent by Friday." No extensions this time. I checked my account right after hanging up, already knowing what I'd see. The number sat there, stubborn and low, refusing to stretch any further. I did the math twice. Then a third time. It didn't change. Okay, I muttered under my breath, pacing the small apartment. I picked up extra shifts, barely sleeping, grabbing whatever hours I could find. Coffee replaced meals. Silence replaced rest. Still, it wasn't enough. Every day brought another reminder, an overdue bill, a warning email, a quiet pressure building from all sides. By Thursday night, I was sitting on the floor, back against the couch, laptop open but untouched. My hands rested in my lap, completely still. I had run out of options. And for the first time in years, I let the thought surface without pushing it away. I need help. The words felt unfamiliar, almost uncomfortable. I stared at my phone for a long time before picking it up. My thumb hovered over my mom's contact, hesitating. Just ask, I whispered to myself. It's temporary. A deep breath. Then I pressed call. Because no matter how far things had drifted, a part of me still believed, when it really mattered, they would be there. The phone rang longer than usual. Each second stretched, pulling tighter against the quiet in my apartment. I almost hung up once. Then her voice came through. Emily? For a moment, I forgot what I was going to say. All the rehearsed words disappeared, leaving only the truth. I need some help, I said, forcing the sentence out before I could rethink it. Just for this month. I'll pay it back, I promise. There was a pause on the other end. Not confusion. Not concern. Just space. How much? She asked finally. I told her. My voice stayed steady, even though my chest didn't. Another pause. Longer this time. I could almost hear her thinking, not about me, but about the decision. Emily, she began slowly, we don't think that's a good idea. I blinked. What? You've been doing so well on your own, she continued. If we step in now, it might set you back. Set me back. I let out a small breath, trying to process it. I'm not asking for long-term support. Just this once. I understand, she said, her tone soft but unmoving. But we believe this is something you need to figure out yourself. Behind her, I could hear faint movement. A familiar voice. Jason. Laughing. My grip tightened around the phone. So, you're saying no? A brief hesitation. Then, quietly, yes. The word didn't hit all at once. It settled slowly, like something sinking deeper than expected. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. Okay. The call ended soon after. No argument. No raised voices. Just a clear answer. And as I lowered the phone, staring at the empty space in front of me, one realization cut through everything else when I finally asked for help. There was none. I sat there for a long time after the call ended, the silence pressing in from every corner of the room. My phone was still in my hand, the screen dark now, reflecting nothing back. Figure it out yourself. The words echoed longer than they should have. I told myself to move, to do something. But my body didn't follow. Minutes passed. Maybe more. Eventually, out of habit more than intention, I opened social media, just to distract myself for a second. And that's when I saw it. A photo. Bright. Loud. Impossible to ignore. Jason, standing in the driveway, smiling wide, one hand resting on the hood of a brand new car. Shiny, untouched, still catching the sunlight like it had just been driven home. My mom stood next to him, arm wrapped proudly around his shoulder. My dad behind them, keys held up like a celebration. The caption was simple, "So proud of you, Jason. You deserve this." I stared at the screen, my mind struggling to catch up with what I was seeing. The same day I had asked for help. They bought him a car. Not needed. Not urgent. Not survival. A gift. My chest tightened, something sharp rising too fast to control. I tapped the image again, as if it might change if I looked closer. It didn't. The shine of the car, the smiles, the ease of it all stayed exactly the same. You deserve this. I whispered the words under my breath, but they didn't feel meant for him anymore. Because suddenly, everything lined up. The refusals. The explanations. The careful words that tried to make it sound reasonable. It had never been about timing. It had never been about money. And as I lowered the phone, my hands no longer shaking, but steady in a way that felt unfamiliar, one truth landed harder than anything before it. They didn't just choose him when it was easy. They chose him, even when it cost me everything. I didn't plan to go back. Not that day. Not like that. But something in me refused to stay silent anymore. Before I could overthink it, I grabbed my keys and drove straight to the house. The same driveway. The same front door. And parked right there, like proof I couldn't ignore, was the car. Brand new. Shining. Real. I stepped out slowly, my eyes fixed on it for a second longer than necessary. Then I walked inside. Voices stopped the moment I entered. "Emily," my mom said, surprised. "You didn't tell us you were coming." I didn't answer that. I just looked at them, really looked this time. My dad on the couch. Jason leaning against the counter, relaxed, like nothing had shifted. "When were you going to tell me?" I asked. They exchanged a glance. My mom spoke first. "Tell you what?" I let out a short breath, almost a laugh. "About the car." "Oh, that," she said, her tone careful. "We didn't think it was a big deal." "Not a big deal?" I repeated, stepping further into the room. "I called you. I told you I couldn't pay my rent." My dad straightened slightly. "And we told you to handle it. That's part of growing up." I nodded slowly. "Right. Growing up." Then I turned toward Jason. "And this?" I gestured toward the driveway. "What part is this?" He shifted uncomfortably but didn't answer. "He needed it," my mom said quickly. "It's different." "Different how?" My voice rose before I could stop it. "Because he asked? Because he failed? Because he's him." Silence. Again. But this time, it wasn't calm. It was tight, heavy. "I didn't ask for a car," I continued, my words sharper now. "I asked for help. Just enough to stay afloat. And you said no." "Emily, don't twist this," my dad said, his tone firm. "I'm not twisting anything," I shot back. "I'm finally seeing it clearly." No one interrupted me this time. Because there was nothing left to hide. And standing there, in the middle of that room, with everything laid out exactly as it was, I wasn't questioning it anymore. I was done pretending it made sense. For a brief moment, I thought, maybe this time would be different. Maybe now that everything was out in the open, now that I had finally said it without holding back, they would hear me. My chest rose slowly as I waited. No one spoke right away. The silence stretched, heavy, almost promising something. Then my dad exhaled and shook his head. "Emily," he said, calm but firm, "you're overreacting." The words landed harder than anything before. I stared at him. "Overreacting?" "He's your brother," my mom added quickly, stepping in. "He made mistakes, yes, but he needs us right now." "Needs you," I repeated, my voice quieter now, more controlled. "And what do I need?" She hesitated, but only for a second. "You'll be okay," she said softly. "You always are." Something inside me stilled. Completely. I turned to Jason, giving him one last chance. "Say something," I said. "Just once. Tell them the truth." He shifted, avoiding my eyes. "It's not that big of a deal," he muttered. "Not that big of a deal." I let out a slow breath, nodding as if everything had just been confirmed. "So this is it," I said, looking between them. "You know exactly what happened. You know what you did. And you're still choosing him." No one denied it. Not directly. But they didn't need to. My dad's voice came again, steady, final. "We're not choosing sides. We're supporting your brother." The distinction was meaningless. Because standing there, in that moment, it felt exactly the same. I swallowed, the weight of it settling deeper than anything before. Not confusion. Not hope. Just clarity. Okay, I said quietly. No anger. No raised voice. Just acceptance. And as I reached for the door, one thought moved through me with a certainty I had never felt before. That was the last time I would ever stand there. Still hoping they'd choose me. I didn't slam the door. I didn't say anything dramatic, didn't wait for someone to stop me, didn't even look back. The house behind me stayed exactly the same, lights on, voices continuing, life moving forward as if nothing had just shifted. The night air felt colder than I expected. Or maybe it was just me. I walked to my car slowly, each step steady, controlled. My hands didn't shake anymore. My chest didn't tighten. It was strange. After everything, there was no explosion, no release. Just quiet. Inside the car, I sat for a moment without turning the engine on. The steering wheel rested under my fingers, familiar, grounding. I stared straight ahead, but I wasn't really seeing anything. You'll be okay, my mom's voice echoed in my head. This time, it didn't feel like comfort. It felt like distance. I let out a small breath, barely noticeable, and leaned back in the seat. No tears came. No anger followed. Just a stillness that settled deeper with every passing second. For so long, I had filled every silence with hope, explaining, trying, waiting for something to change. Now, there was nothing left to fill. I reached for the keys, paused for a fraction of a second, then started the engine. The sound broke the quiet, but not completely. Some part of it stayed with me, heavier than anything I had carried before. Because this silence wasn't temporary. It wasn't waiting for an answer. It was what remained, when I finally stopped expecting one. I didn't drive far that night. Just enough to get away from the house, from the street, from everything that had defined me for so long. I pulled over near an empty parking lot, turned off the engine, and let the quiet return. This time, it felt different. Not heavy. Not suffocating. Clear. I sat there, hands resting loosely in my lap, replaying the conversation, not to change it, not to argue with it in my head, but to finally accept it exactly as it was. Every word. Every pause. Every choice they made. They're not choosing sides. I exhaled slowly. No, they already did. Saying it out loud shifted something. Subtle, but final. For years, I had been standing in the same place, hoping the outcome would change if I tried harder, stayed longer, proved more. But the pattern had never broken, only repeated over and over with different excuses. And suddenly, the question wasn't why they treated me this way anymore. It was why I kept staying. I looked down at my phone, my thumb hovering over their names, contacts I had reached for countless times before. Apologies. Explanations. Second chances I gave before they were even asked for. Not this time. I'm done, I said quietly. No anger behind it. No hesitation. Just a decision that didn't need to be defended. I opened my settings, paused for a fraction of a second, then blocked the numbers. One by one. The screen went still. No calls. No messages. No way back through the same door. And for the first time, that didn't feel like loss. It felt like space. Because walking away wasn't about punishing them. It was about finally choosing myself. The next morning, everything felt quieter than it should have. No messages. No missed calls. Just a clean, empty screen, like the decision I made had already erased something deeper than contact names. I didn't rush. I moved through my apartment slowly, folding clothes, packing boxes, deciding what stayed and what didn't. Each item felt lighter than expected, as if it had already lost its meaning the moment I chose to leave. A sweater I used to wear at family dinners. A photo I never really looked at. I paused, holding it for a second, then set it face down in the box without another thought. There was no dramatic moment. No breakdown. Just a steady, quiet process of letting go. By the time the afternoon light shifted across the floor, most of the room was empty. Walls bare. Shelves cleared. The space echoed slightly when I moved. I stood in the middle of it, taking it in. This was where I had tried to hold everything together. Where I had believed things might eventually feel different. Now it was just a room. I picked up the last box, then hesitated, glancing around one final time. Not searching for something to miss, just acknowledging what was no longer mine to carry. Okay, I murmured under my breath. The word felt small, but complete. I turned off the lights, closed the door behind me, and didn't look back. Because for the first time, leaving didn't feel like losing something. It felt like I had finally put it down. As I walked away from that door, carrying nothing but what I chose to keep, I realized something I had never allowed myself to say before. For so long, leaving had felt like betrayal. Like I was the one giving up, the one breaking something that was supposed to be unbreakable. That's what I had been taught family stays, no matter what. But each step forward made that belief feel less true. I paused for a moment beside my car, the cool air brushing against my face, grounding me in a way that felt almost unfamiliar. My reflection stared back faintly from the window, tired, but steady. "I'm not leaving my family," I said quietly, the words forming slowly, carefully. They didn't feel like an excuse. They felt like truth. "I'm just done letting them hurt me." The sentence settled into place, heavier than anything I had carried before, but also clearer. No anger attached to it. No need to prove it to anyone else. Because for the first time, I wasn't trying to make them understand. I was finally understanding myself. And standing there, with the distance already growing behind me, I knew this wasn't abandonment. It was a boundary I should have drawn a long time ago. The first few days felt unfamiliar in a way I couldn't quite explain. Not lonely, just different. There was no background noise of expectation, no subtle pressure shaping every decision. Just space, quiet, open, almost unsettling at first. I moved into a smaller place across town, nothing fancy, just enough to start over. The walls were plain, the rooms barely furnished, but for the first time, everything inside belonged to me. I remember standing in the middle of the living room on the first night, holding a cup of coffee that had already gone cold. No one was calling my name. No one was waiting for me to fix something. "Okay," I whispered to myself, a small breath escaping with it. "Let's figure this out." It wasn't confidence. Not yet. But it was something close to willingness. I rebuilt slowly. Picked up extra work again, but this time, it felt different. Every hour I put in stayed with me. Every dollar earned meant something because it wasn't being pulled away without my permission. There were small moments that surprised me. Cooking dinner without rushing. Sitting in silence without needing to fill it. Laughing at something random and realizing I didn't have to explain it to anyone. And then, one morning, it hit me without warning. I woke up, and I didn't feel heavy. No lingering tension. No quiet dread about what might happen next. Just a steady calm I hadn't known I was missing. I sat up, looking around the room, the plain walls, the scattered boxes I hadn't finished unpacking, and something shifted. This wasn't just survival anymore. It was a beginning. At first, I thought moving on would be about distance, new space, new routines, new habits. But it didn't take long to realize the hardest part wasn't where I lived. It was what I carried with me. Some nights, the silence felt too loud. Old conversations would replay without warning. A single phrase, "You'll be okay," could echo in my mind longer than it should. I'd catch myself questioning things I thought I had already decided. Was I too harsh? Did I leave too soon? The questions came quietly, but they stayed. So instead of pushing them away, I started sitting with them. Not to justify the past, not to rewrite it, but to understand it without losing myself in it. I began small, writing things down. Moments I remembered. How they made me feel without minimizing, without correcting the truth to make it easier to accept. There were days I had to stop halfway through, the weight of it catching up faster than I expected. But I didn't turn away. Not this time. And slowly, something shifted. I stopped asking what I could have done differently, and started seeing what had always been there. The patterns. The imbalance. The quiet ways I had learned to disappear just to keep things stable. That wasn't love, I whispered once, the words unfamiliar but steady. It didn't erase the past. It didn't make it hurt less overnight. But it changed how I held it. Because healing, I realized, wasn't about forgetting what happened. It was about finally telling the truth and believing it. Healing didn't change everything overnight. There were still difficult mornings, still moments where old habits tried to pull me back. But something steady had begun to grow underneath it all, a quiet sense of direction I hadn't felt before. I kept working, but now there was intention behind it. I took on projects that actually mattered to me, not just the ones that filled time or paid the next bill. Late nights turned into progress instead of survival. One afternoon, I remember checking my account, not out of fear this time, but out of habit. The number had grown. Not dramatically, not in a way that would impress anyone else. But it was enough to make me pause. Okay, that's new, I murmured, a small smile forming without thinking. It wasn't just the money. It was what it represented. Control. Stability. Choice. I started noticing other things too. The way I spoke more freely in conversations. The way I no longer hesitated before making decisions, waiting for approval that would never come. Even simple moments, signing a lease extension, planning something weeks ahead, felt different. I've got this, I said quietly one day, catching my reflection in the mirror. And for the first time, it didn't feel like something I had to prove. Opportunities followed in ways I hadn't expected. A better position at work. More responsibility, yes, but also more recognition. My ideas were heard. My effort was acknowledged. Not because I demanded it, but because it was there. And slowly, almost without realizing it, I stopped measuring myself against what I had lost. Because what I was building now was finally mine. For a while, I didn't hear anything about them. No calls. No messages. No updates passed through mutual relatives. It was as if the distance I created had sealed that part of my life completely. And honestly, I let it stay that way. Until one afternoon, my phone lit up with a number I didn't recognize. I almost ignored it. But something made me pause. Hello. There was breathing on the other end, uneven, rushed. Then a voice I hadn't heard in months. Emily, it's me. Jason. I didn't respond right away. I just listened. I need help, he said, the words coming out slower than I expected. Not defensive. Not careless. Just strained. My grip on the phone tightened slightly. What happened? A short, bitter laugh escaped him. Everything. He explained in fragments. The car gone after an accident he couldn't cover. Debt stacking up. A job he lost after missing too many days. One problem feeding into the next until nothing held anymore. I thought I could handle it, he admitted, voice cracking for the first time. I really did. I closed my eyes for a second, picturing it without trying to. The confidence he used to carry, gone. Replaced by something unfamiliar. Mom and Dad? I asked quietly. They tried, he said, hesitating. But it's not enough this time. Not enough. The words lingered longer than anything else. Because for the first time, the balance had shifted. The one who was always protected was finally standing without it. And as the silence settled between us again, heavier now, more real, I realized something I hadn't expected to feel. Not anger, not satisfaction, just a quiet, building tension, waiting to see what I would do next. I didn't give him an answer right away. The call ended with a quiet, unfinished pause, like both of us knew this wasn't something that could be decided in a single moment. But the silence didn't last long. The next day, my phone lit up again. This time, it wasn't a number I didn't recognize. It was my mom. I stared at the screen for a few seconds, the name sitting there like it had never left. No messages for months, and now this. I let it ring once. Twice. Then I picked up. Emily? Her voice came through softer than I remembered. Careful. Almost uncertain. I didn't fill the gap. Yes. We heard from Jason, she said, the words slow measured. He told us he reached out to you. Of course he did. And? I asked. A small breath on the other end. He's going through a lot right now. It's worse than we thought. I leaned back slightly, already knowing where this was going. We were hoping, maybe you could help, she continued. Just this once. He really needs you. Needs you. The same words. The same tone. Just a different moment. I let the silence stretch this time, not out of hesitation, but because I wanted her to sit in it. Emily, she prompted gently. I glanced around my apartment, the quiet, the order, the life I had built piece by piece without them. Where were you when I needed help? I asked, my voice calm, almost distant. She hesitated. That's not the same, it is, I cut in, not raising my voice. It's exactly the same. Another pause. Heavier now. We thought you could handle it, she said finally. I almost smiled at that. Not out of amusement, but recognition. And now you don't think he can, I replied. She didn't answer. She didn't have to. Because the irony had already settled in, quiet, undeniable. For the first time. They weren't calling to give. They were calling to ask. The silence on the line stretched, but this time, it didn't pull me back in. Emily, my mom, tried again, her voice softer, almost pleading now. We're not asking for much. Just help him get through this. You know how he is. I closed my eyes for a second, letting that sentence settle. Yes, I did know how he was. That's exactly the problem, I said quietly. There was a pause. Then my dad's voice came in, firmer, familiar. This isn't the time to make a point. He's your brother. I let out a slow breath. And I was your daughter. The words landed differently. I could hear it in the way no one spoke right away. I needed help, I continued, my voice steady now, not rising, not breaking. I asked. I explained. And you said no. That was different, my mom started. No, I cut in, sharper this time. It wasn't different. It just wasn't him. Silence again. Heavier. You taught me something that day, I said, my grip tightening slightly around the phone. You taught me that when things fall apart, I'm on my own. That's not what we meant, my dad replied quickly. But that's what you did, I answered. The truth didn't need to be louder. It just needed to stay. I figured it out, I went on. I rebuilt everything without you. Every bill, every step, every choice. And now you're calling me because he can't do the same. He needs you, my mom whispered. I shook my head, even though she couldn't see it. No, I said. He needs to face what I had to face. Emily, please, I'm not your solution anymore. The words came out clean. Final. No anger left in them. Just clarity. I hope he finds a way, I added, softer now. I really do. But it's not going to be through me. No one argued this time. Because there was nothing left to argue. And as I ended the call, one feeling rose through everything else. Not guilt, not hesitation, relief. For a moment after the call ended, I just stood there, phone still in my hand, the silence settling in again, But this time, it felt different. Lighter. Not because anything had been fixed. Not because the past had changed. But because, for the first time, I hadn't been to it. I walked over to the window, looking out at the quiet street below. Cars passed. People moved on with their lives. Nothing dramatic. Nothing cinematic. And yet, something inside me had shifted completely. They needed me, I said softly, almost testing the words. Then I shook my head. No, they needed control. That realization didn't hurt the way I expected. It didn't sting or pull me backward. It clarified everything. All those years of trying to earn a place, to prove I was worth choosing, it had never been about me becoming enough. It had been about me staying available. And now, I wasn't. I took a slow breath, feeling it fill my chest fully, without that familiar tightness. I get to decide now, I whispered. The sentence felt unfamiliar, but right. Not because I had taken something from them, but because I had finally stopped giving away what was mine. I thought about the version of me who would have said yes without hesitation. Who would have dropped everything, fixed the problem, and walked away unseen again. She would have called it love. I looked at my reflection in the glass, steady, grounded. I choose me, I said, this time without doubt. And for the first time in my life, that choice didn't come with guilt. It came with peace. The silence didn't end with that call. It stretched into the next day and the next. No follow-up messages. No arguments. Just absence. But this time, it wasn't mine. A week later, my phone lit up again. Not a call, just a message. From my mom. We didn't realize how much you were doing. I read it once. Then again. Another message came through seconds later. Things are harder than we thought. I didn't reply, because I already knew what things meant. Bills left unpaid. Problems that no longer disappeared. Silence where there used to be someone fixing everything before it broke. For the first time, they were feeling it. Not the anger. Not the rejection. The absence. I set my phone down slowly, letting the screen fade to black. No rush to answer. No instinct to step in. Across the room, everything was still in place, organized, steady, mine. And somewhere, miles away, I could almost picture it. The same house, the same people, but something missing. Not obvious at first. Not loud. Just noticeable enough to matter. She used to handle this, I imagine someone saying. She'll figure it out. Another voice might reply, echoing words I knew too well. Except this time, there was no one stepping in. And as that realization settled, quiet, undeniable, I felt no satisfaction, no need to prove anything. Just a calm understanding. They hadn't lost control. They had lost me. Time passed quietly after that. Not in a way that erased what happened, but in a way that no longer controlled me. There were no dramatic reunions, no sudden apologies that fixed everything. Just distance, steady, consistent, real. And within that distance, something unfamiliar began to settle into place. Peace. I built routines that didn't revolve around anyone else's expectations. Mornings felt lighter. Evenings didn't carry the same weight they used to. I started noticing small things again. The way sunlight filled the room, the comfort of silence that didn't need to be explained. One night, I caught myself smiling for no reason. It surprised me. Not because happiness was impossible, but because it used to feel conditional. Something I had to earn, maintain, protect. Now it just existed. I sat by the window, watching the city move in the distance, and for a moment, I thought about them. Not with anger. Not even with sadness. Just a quiet acknowledgement of what was, and what no longer was. I hope they figure it out, I said softly. And I meant it. Because letting go didn't mean I stopped caring. It just meant I stopped sacrificing myself to prove it. The past didn't disappear. It became something I understood, something that shaped me, but didn't define me anymore. And as I sat there, feeling the calm settle deeper than anything before it, I realized something simple but final. I didn't need them to choose me anymore, because I already had. And maybe that's where the real question begins. Because walking away wasn't the hardest part. Staying would have been. There was a time when I believed forgiveness meant returning, picking up the same role, answering the same calls, pretending nothing had ever broken. But now I'm not so sure. Forgive them, people say. Family is everything. Is it? Or is that just something we repeat, even when it hurts us? I've thought about it more than I expected. Not in anger, not in regret, but in quiet moments when everything is still and there's no one else to answer for me. Could I forgive them? Maybe. Could I go back? That's a different question. Because forgiveness doesn't erase patterns. It doesn't rebuild trust that was never protected. And it doesn't undo the moment you realize your place was never equal. So, what would you do? If the people who were supposed to protect you kept choosing someone else, again and again. If they only reached out when they needed you. If staying meant losing yourself piece by piece. Would you forgive them? Or would you walk away for good? And this is where it stops being just my story and starts becoming yours. Because people will tell you what the right choice is. They always do. Forgive them. Blood is blood. Walk away. Protect your peace. Two sides. Two completely different lives. But neither one is easy. If you forgive, you carry the risk of being hurt again. You reopen doors that were closed for a reason. You trust people who already showed you who they are. If you walk away, you carry something else. Distance. Silence. The weight of knowing you chose yourself, even if no one else understands it. So which one is stronger? Staying or leaving? Be honest. Not the answer that sounds good. Not the one people expect from you. The one you would actually choose if you were standing where I stood alone, exhausted, finally seeing the truth. Would you pick Team Forgive, believing people can change, that family deserves another chance no matter what? Or would you stand with Team Walk Away, choosing self-respect over history, peace over obligation? There's no neutral ground here. So tell me, what would you do, and why?